My name is Elaine Porter, and I am 84 years old. I've lived through war, poverty, childbirth, and even the death of a husband. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the horror that came from within my own family, from my own blood. Or rather, the blood that was forced into my life the moment my mother married again. I remember it like it happened just yesterday. I was standing at the edge of the living room, my cane trembling in my hand, as I looked into the cold eyes of my stepbrother Marcus. He was twice my size, even in his old age. Towering over me, eyes burning with something I couldn't understand. And right there in front of me, he held the blood-stained poker that had crushed the side of my mother's skull just moments earlier. My knees gave way, and I dropped to the floor. "You made me do this, Elaine," he growled, stepping closer. She was going to tell them everything. About us. About what happened to you. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My body was frozen, my heart thundering in my ears. He killed her. He actually killed our mother, the only woman who ever truly loved me. And now I knew. He wasn't going to stop. The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, but Marcus didn't flinch. He knelt down beside me, gripping my chin tight between his fingers. "You'll tell them it was an accident, or next time they won't find a body." His breath smelled like whiskey and dust. My tears ran hot. I had protected this man for decades. I had suffered in silence, swallowed screams, buried memories deep enough to rot. And for what? So he could murder the woman who gave me life. My voice cracked. "I won't lie for you anymore." And that's when the front door burst open. But let me take you back to when all this began. Long before the poker. Long before the blood. Long before I found myself gasping for air on the cold wooden floor, knowing the truth could get me killed. I was only 11 when Marcus entered my life. My mother, recently widowed, had married a man named Vernon Davis. I hated him from the moment he stepped into our home with his heavy boots and loud voice. But it was Marcus, Vernon's son, who truly unsettled me. He was 14. Pale, thin, with hollow eyes that watched you like you were prey. He never smiled unless something was broken, or someone was hurt. At first I thought I was imagining things. The way he'd pull my hair when no one was looking. The way my dolls would end up decapitated on the floor. The small scratches he'd make on my arms and say it was just a game. But my mother was in love, and Vernon, well, he'd already made it clear that his son could do no wrong. One afternoon I found a small mouse, barely alive, in my shoe. I screamed and dropped it, only for Marcus to come around the corner laughing like he'd just told a joke. "It's just a mouse, Elaine. You're such a baby." I ran to my mother, heart pounding. But she only looked up from her sewing side and said, "Don't start trouble, darling. Marcus is just trying to get used to you. Trying to get used to me." That was her excuse. Over the years, those games escalated. He'd lock me in closets for hours, tear my homework to pieces, whisper awful things at night. Sometimes he'd wait until my mother left for her night shifts, and then he'd pound on my bedroom door just to hear me cry. One time when I was 15, he cornered me in the kitchen. It was the first time he touched me in a way that made my skin crawl. "You're growing up," he said. "Starting to look interesting." I slapped him. My hand trembled. He only smiled and whispered, "Try that again and I'll break your fingers." I wanted to tell my mother, but she'd been growing distant, tired. Vernon had started drinking, and she spent most of her days worrying about bills and bruises. I didn't want to give her another burden, so I kept quiet. That silence was the beginning of the end for me. In my 20s I moved out. Tried to run far from that house, from that boy-turned-monster. I thought if I started my own life, found a job, married, had kids, it would all disappear. But trauma doesn't work that way. Follows you. Hides in your bones. Years passed, and yet I kept Marcus's secrets. I smiled at family reunions. I pretended he was just my stepbrother. But I knew. I remembered. Every word. Every touch. Every bruise. And he knew too. Which is why, when our mother fell ill in her 80s and moved in with me, Marcus came crawling back like a shadow I couldn't shake. "I'll help," he said. "It's our mother." I should have said no. I should have locked the door in his face. But I was tired caring for her alone. And I never thought he'd go that far. That was my mistake. Within weeks, the air in the house changed. My mother grew afraid. She wouldn't say why. But I saw the fear in her eyes every time Marcus walked into the room. And then one night she whispered to me, "Elaine, we have to talk. I know what he did to you." Froze. I never told her. Not once. But somehow she knew. Maybe she always knew. She said, "I should have protected you. I'm going to the police." That was the night he killed her. And now, as I sit in this police car, blanket wrapped around my shoulders, blood on my hands that isn't mine, I realize the story isn't over. Because Marcus ran. And I know him. He won't stay hidden for long. He'll come back. He always comes back. And next time, it won't just be my mother he comes for. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you believe no woman, no child should suffer in silence. The night they took Marcus's mugshot, I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. But deep down I knew it was useless. He was already gone. He ran before the police arrived. Left through the back door like a ghost. And despite the blood on the fireplace poker and the shattered glass in the living room, they said they didn't have enough to hold him if they couldn't find him. "He's dangerous," I told the officers, my voice trembling. "He's done this before. He's hurt people. He's hurt me." But all they saw was an old woman in shock. Just another domestic gone bad. "Ma'am," one of the officers said, placing a soft hand on my shoulder, "do you have proof of any of this?" Proof. After all those years of silence. Of swallowing my truth like poison. Now they wanted evidence. I went back to that empty house, the one that still smelled like my mother's tea and Marcus's cologne. And as I stepped over the bloodstain that had soaked into the rug, I realized something awful. I had cleaned up after him my entire life. And it was time to stop. But stopping meant remembering. And remembering meant pain. Took me days before I could sleep again. And when I did, the nightmares came like a flood. I saw him, 14 again, dragging a knife across my notebook while I cried. I heard my mother's voice, calm, distant, saying, "Marcus is just lonely. Be nice to him." I felt the sting of his slap on my birthday when I wore the dress he didn't like. But worst of all, I remembered the moment he first broke me. It was the summer I turned 16. The house was quiet. My mother had gone to work. And Vernon was passed out drunk on the couch. I was in the laundry room, folding shirts, when Marcus cornered me. He said, "You think you're better than me now? With your grades and your soft little smile." I didn't answer. That always made him angrier. But before I could walk away, he pushed me against the dryer. What happened next? I buried it for over 60 years. Locked it up. Told myself it wasn't real. That it was just a bad dream. But it wasn't. He held me down. Told me no one would believe me. That Vernon would say I asked for it. That my mother would cry but wouldn't leave him. And he was right. I didn't tell. I didn't scream. I just curled up in bed that night and stared at the ceiling, hating myself for surviving. From that day on I stopped smiling. I moved through life like a shadow. Graduated, got married, had 2 boys. But even when I held my babies in my arms, I never felt safe. I was always waiting for Marcus to show up again. And he did, at my wedding, grinning like a proud brother. At my father's funeral, where he hugged me too long. At family birthdays, always lurking near the cake. My husband, James, never knew. He asked once, years later, why I flinched when anyone raised their voice. Why I hated tight spaces. Why I locked the bathroom door even when I was alone. "I had a rough childhood," I said. I didn't know how to say the rest. James died before he could ever meet the real me, the girl that Marcus had shattered. And when my mother got sick and I took her in, I thought maybe I could find closure. Maybe in those last days she would look me in the eye and say, "I knew what he did. I'm sorry I failed you." But she never said it. Not until the night before she died. I was feeding her soup, watching her hands tremble, when she looked at me and whispered, "Elaine, I heard you crying through the walls. I just didn't know what to do." I nearly dropped the spoon. You knew." She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I was so scared. Vernon had a way of making things worse. And Marcus, he wasn't right. I should have taken you and run. That was when I realized. I had suffered in silence all my life because the one person who was supposed to protect me had been paralyzed by fear. She hadn't ignored me. She'd been afraid of Marcus too. But that didn't stop him. That night, after I tucked her into bed, she tried to call the police. I found her phone clutched in her hand, Marcus's number still on the screen. I don't know what she said to him, but it was enough to make him snap. He came over in a rage. And the rest, you already know. Now, I sit in this courtroom, 60 years of pain stitched into my bones, and I listen to the defense lawyer say, "Mr. Davis has no prior record. No proof of abuse exists. This is a case of elder confusion and family conflict gone wrong." I nearly laugh. Confusion. Family conflict. He raped me, beat me, threatened me. And then he murdered the only mother I had. But I have no proof. Just my word. Just my voice. Just my story. So I stand in front of a full courtroom and I tell it. Tell everything. From the mouse in my shoe to the blood on the poker. From the laundry room to the moment I collapsed in front of my mother's body. People gasp. Some cry. Few walk out. But Marcus, he stares at me. Unblinking. No guilt. No shame. Just power. Like he still owns me. When I finish, the judge looks at me and says, "Thank you, Mrs. Porter. We'll now proceed with the next witness." I step down, my legs weak. But inside something small starts to burn. Not rage. Not fear. Resolve. Because whether or not they convict him, whether or not justice is served, I won't be silent anymore. I've waited my whole life to take my voice back. But what happened the next day made my blood run cold. I came home to find a note taped to my door. Just 2 words. "You're next." If this story has gripped your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Trust me. You won't believe what happens next. I must have stood there for 5 whole minutes, the note fluttering in my hand as the wind picked up. Just 2 words, "You're next," scrawled in uneven black ink, the kind that looked like it was written by someone shaking with fury. Or excitement. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. I looked around slowly, the neighborhood suddenly feeling different. Too quiet. Too still. The neighbor's dog wasn't barking. No cars were passing. Not even the rustling of the trees could drown out the fear crawling up my spine. I wasn't just an old woman anymore. I was a target. I went inside, locked all the doors, drew the curtains, and sat down in my late husband's armchair. I could still smell his cologne on the cushion. James had always made me feel safe, even when I never told him the whole truth. Now I wished I had. I wished I'd given him the full story so maybe someone, anyone, would have known what Marcus was capable of. My hands were trembling too hard to hold the phone. I thought of calling the detective on the case. Officer Reynolds. He'd been polite, professional, but he didn't really believe me. None of them truly did. I was just a frail old woman who lost her mother to domestic violence, who had a grudge against her stepbrother and maybe a hint of senility. That's how they saw me. But Marcus didn't see me as weak. Well, he saw me as dangerous. That note proved it. And if he wanted war, I'd give it to him. The next morning, I marched into the police station and demanded to speak to Officer Reynolds. "He left town, ma'am," the woman at the front desk said, barely glancing up. "Transferred upstate. You'll have to wait for a new detective to be assigned." I stared at her in disbelief. "So there's no one investigating this anymore?" She shrugged. "I can take your number. Someone will call you." Someone would call me. I left without saying another word, fury bubbling in my chest. They weren't going to help me. No one was. Not unless I forced them to. So I did what I hadn't done in 60 years. I started digging. I went to the old house, the one I grew up in, the one Marcus had haunted like a demon in the walls. It had long been sold and converted into apartments, but the neighborhood hadn't changed much. I stood in front of that peeling blue door and felt like a child again. I rang the bell. A college student opened the door, earbuds in, eyes wide at the sight of me. Can I help you?" I told him I used to live here, asked if I could look around the basement. "Just for a minute," I said. "It's important." To my surprise, he let me in. The stairs creaked under my weight as I descended into that dark basement. The smell of mildew and old would hit me instantly. But something else too, something colder. I felt it before I saw it. Behind the old water heater, I found the small wooden box. I remembered it instantly. It had been my mother's. She used to keep her savings in it, but one day it disappeared. She said she lost it. But I always suspected Marcus. The box was dusty, rusted at the hinges, but when I opened it, my heart nearly stopped. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written by my mother, addressed to no one. I picked one at random and began to read. "Elaine won't talk to me anymore. Think she hates me. But I know what Marcus did to her. I saw the bruises. I tried to talk to Vernon, but he just said girls are dramatic." I clutched the letter like it was life itself. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. My mother knew. And she had documented it. The second letter was worse. "He came into my room last night while Vernon was passed out. He said if I ever told anyone, he'd hurt Elaine again. I don't know what to do. I'm so afraid. I failed my daughter." My hands were shaking violently now. The box held every word I'd needed the world to hear, and my mother had hidden it, buried it in the same house where we both suffered. I took the box and walked straight to the courthouse. But nothing could have prepared me for what I found when I got there. Marcus was outside, standing by the street in a black coat, a cigarette in his hand, as if he hadn't just torn my life apart. As if he wasn't being tried for murder. As if he wasn't the reason I woke up screaming every night. He saw me, smiled, and tipped an invisible hat. Froze. For a second I thought I might collapse right there. But I didn't. I held the box tighter and walked past him like he didn't matter. Like I wasn't afraid. But I was. I handed the box over to the clerk at the district attorney's office. The woman flipped through the letters, eyes growing wide. "Where did you get these?" "I lived that story," I whispered. "And my mother wrote it. She promised they'd reopen the investigation. Promised they'd add it to the trial. Promised justice would come." But later that night, the power in my house went out. Every light, every socket gone. The only thing that worked was the doorbell. And it rang. Once. Then silence. I didn't answer. I sat in the dark with a kitchen knife in my hand and my back against the wall. The phone wouldn't dial. My cell battery was dead. I waited until sunrise. And when I opened the door the next morning, I found something even worse than another note. "Dead bird. Hung from my porch light by a red ribbon." He was back. And now, he was playing games. If you believe no one should ever have to fear the people meant to protect them, please like, comment and subscribe. What happens next will chill you to the bone. I stood there in my thin nightgown, the morning chill biting into my bones as I stared up at the lifeless bird swinging from my porch light. The red ribbon tied around its tiny neck reminded me of the ones my mother used to place in my braids when I was little, back before Marcus turned everything into a nightmare. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. Marcus was sending a message. A warning. Maybe even a promise. But I wasn't 11 anymore. I was an old woman who had buried her fear for decades, and I was tired of flinching. Still, my hands trembled as I brought the scissors out and cut the bird down. I wrapped it in a towel and placed it in a shoebox. I didn't want the police thinking I was crazy or making up stories. I needed them to see the things he was capable of. But when I brought the box to the station, the officer at the desk barely looked inside before shrugging. "Ma'am," he said, his tone flat, "it could be a prank. We'll add it to the report, but unless you have video or a witness, it's circumstantial." I wanted to scream. A prank. My stepbrother was on trial for murder. I had a shoebox with a dead bird strung up on my porch, and still, no one took me seriously. So I did the unthinkable. I decided to confront him myself. The court hadn't detained him. He was out on bail, staying in a rented apartment just 10 minutes from mine. I found the address listed in the court records. I knew it was reckless. I knew I was putting myself in danger. But something inside me had snapped. I couldn't live like this, waiting to die, waiting to be hunted. I had to look him in the eye. I didn't bring a weapon, just my truth. When I knocked on the door, I expected silence, maybe even the sound of footsteps running away. But Marcus opened it almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting for me. Well, he said, leaning against the doorframe. You came. Brave of you. His hair was slicked back. His shirt unbuttoned just enough to show his sun-damaged chest. He looked smug, like a man in control. I came to say one thing, I said, my voice steady despite the hurricane inside me. You won't win. Not this time. He laughed, low and bitter. Win? Elaine, I've already won. You think those letters matter? You think people care about the sob story of an old woman whose mind is fading? My mind is clear, I snapped. And those letters are real. Just like what you did to me. And to her. His face changed. His smile slipped. He stepped closer. You don't get it, do you? He hissed. You don't walk away from me. You never did. You always come back. You've always been mine. That word, made me sick. I turned and walked away before I let the tears fall. But I didn't go home. I went straight to the DA's office. I want to testify again, I told them. On record. Every detail. And I want a restraining order. Today. It took some time, but they granted the order. They rescheduled my testimony, this time with the new letters in evidence. I thought for a moment that maybe I'd won a small battle. But war was still looming. The next night my son called me from the hospital. Mom, you need to come. I thought it was about the trial. About Marcus. But when I arrived, I saw my grandson lying unconscious in a hospital bed. Tubes in his arms, blood dried at his hairline. They said he was hit by a car, my son whispered. But it wasn't an accident. The driver didn't stop. He just aimed and sped up. My heart shattered. My grandson, sweet Peter, just 24. He had nothing to do with this. But Marcus did. He always found a way to twist the knife where it hurt most. I left the hospital in a daze. And when I got home, another note waited for me. You're running out of family. I couldn't breathe. I collapsed onto the floor, gasping, my body shaking from the inside out. He wasn't going to stop. Not unless I stopped him first. The next morning I called a lawyer. A friend of James's, someone who owed me a favor. I want to sue him, I said. Civil court. If criminal court won't shut him down, I'll take everything he owns. I'll expose every secret. I'll burn his legacy to the ground. The lawyer hesitated. Elaine, you're putting yourself in the line of fire. I've lived in the fire since I was 11, I said. Now I'm ready to light the match. So we filed the suit. Emotional distress, abuse, harassment, wrongful death. Everything we could dig up. But Marcus, he wasn't done playing. A week later I received a box in the mail. No return address. Inside was my old music box. The one I had as a child. The one I hadn't seen since I was 16. I opened it slowly. It played a warped, eerie version of You Are My Sunshine. Inside was a photo of me, taken the night before. I was standing by my window, looking out at the stars. I dropped it and backed away. He'd been watching me. Not just threatening. Not just lurking. He had been inside my life again. Peering through my windows. Breathing my air. Called the police. Again. This time they sent someone. They installed cameras. Advised me not to stay alone. But I couldn't leave. Not yet. Not when everything was coming to a head. So I stayed. And that night the camera caught something. Figure. Black hoodie. Gloved hands. Standing on my porch. scraping something into the wood with a pocket knife. By morning it was clear. One word. Green. He had carved it into my front door. And when I replayed the footage, I realized something even more terrifying. He wasn't alone. Someone else stood behind him. In the shadows. Unmoving. Another figure. Another player in this nightmare. I wasn't just fighting Marcus anymore. There was someone else. And they knew everything. If you believe evil doesn't end with just one face, please like, comment, and subscribe. In the next chapter, the truth will cut deeper than anything before. The footage haunted me. I must have watched it 50 times. The way Marcus stood there, calm, calculated, etching mine into the wood like it was a signature. But it was the second figure that stole my sleep. He or she stood still just behind the bushes. No movement. No reaction. Just a shadow watching my house like they had all the time in the world. Who were they? Friend. A lover. Someone from his past. Someone from mine. I printed a still from the video and brought it to the DA's office, hands shaking. There's someone else, I told them. Marcus isn't acting alone. They squinted at the image, zoomed in, brightened it. But the figure was too far in the dark. No facial features. No identifying marks. Just a silent witness. We'll enhance the video, they said. But without more evidence, there's not much we can do. I left feeling colder than I'd ever felt before. And the wind outside had nothing to do with it. Back home, I sat at the dining table and spread out everything I had. Letters, court documents, restraining orders, photos, printed emails. A war table. That's when I found it. Tucked behind one of my mother's old letters was a torn piece of notebook paper. Something she must have ripped out and hidden without thought. On it were scribbled words in her unmistakable cursive. He keeps talking to someone on the phone. Keeps whispering her name, Sasha. I think she's the one who gave him the money. Sasha. That name hit me like a thunderclap. I hadn't heard it in years. Sasha had been my childhood neighbor. A girl 2 years older than Marcus, pretty, wild, always hanging around even when she wasn't invited. She smoked behind the school and once poured bleach in my lemonade because I stared at her boyfriend too long. She vanished from the neighborhood when we were teens. Rumor was she ran away to Florida after getting into some legal trouble. And now she was back. Helping Marcus. I called the DA immediately, told them everything I remembered. They said they'd look into it, but their tone told me they didn't take the name seriously. Not like I did. So I went looking for Sasha myself. I went through my husband's old address book, tried every Sasha listed. Dead end after dead end, until I found a single connection. A florist shop registered under Sasha Barnes, just 2 towns away. It was a long shot, but I took a bus the next morning. The shop was small, elegant, too refined for someone like Sasha. But when I walked in, saw her. She looked older, of course. But it was her. Same sharp cheekbones, same piercing gray eyes. She didn't recognize me at first. "Can I help you?" she asked with a tight smile. I stepped forward, staring her down. "I know who you are, Sasha. And I know what you've been doing." Her smile faltered. "I'm sorry, do we know each other? You used to live on Brighton Street. Behind the Parkers. You once told me I'd never be good enough to breathe your air." Her jaw clenched. "Elaine." There it was. Recognition. "I don't know what Marcus told you," I continued. "But you're helping a murderer. Rapist. And I promise you, I will drag your name into every courtroom until the truth comes out." She stepped around the counter. Close enough I could see the tension in her lips. "I don't know what you think you know, but Marcus and I haven't spoken in years." I pulled out the letter. "My mother wrote your name. She said you gave him money." Her eyes flickered. Fear. Or guilt. Maybe both. Then, cold as stone, she said, "Get out of my shop. I'll be back," I promised. With subpoenas. With names. With history. She didn't reply. But she didn't stop me either. As I stepped back out into the light, a strange chill slid down my spine. Sasha wasn't just a name. She was part of it. Somehow. And I was getting close. Too close. That night my front window shattered. I was in the kitchen when I heard it. The sound of glass exploding, the cold wind rushing in, and the weight of a brick hitting my floor. I ran into the living room, heart pounding. The brick was wrapped in duct tape. I peeled it open and read the note inside. "Keep digging and we'll bury what's left of you." This wasn't just about Marcus anymore. This was bigger, deeper, older, like a wound that never healed. A rot that had spread under my life for decades. I called the police again, and this time they took it seriously. The brick, the note, the camera footage, it was finally enough for protection. They assigned me an officer to check in every night. I bought new locks. I had a neighbor stay with me. But I couldn't sleep. Because my past wasn't done with me. And I knew what I had to do next. There was one more name I hadn't said aloud. One more person who knew the truth. All of it. Vernon. My stepfather. He had vanished after my mother died. Rumor was he moved down south, started a new family, tried to outrun the shame of everything he'd ignored. But I knew how to find him. I still had his social security number, tucked in a box of old insurance forms. So I did a trace. And what I found shocked me. Vernon wasn't dead. He was living under a new name, Harold Dixon, in a nursing home in Georgia. And the nursing home was owned by Sasha's husband. The web was wider than I ever imagined. Marcus, Sasha, Vernon, all connected. And I was finally about to pull the thread that unraveled it all. So I packed my things and booked a flight. Because if Vernon was still breathing, he was going to talk. And if he didn't, I would bury every last one of them in truth. If you believe truth has power, no matter how long it takes, like, comment and subscribe. In the next chapter, the secrets waiting in Georgia will break everything wide open. The plane touched down in Georgia just after sunset, and as the wheels hit the tarmac, my hands tightened around the armrest. I hadn't flown in over 30 years. Not since James passed. But I wasn't here for leisure or family reunions. I was here to confront the man who first turned his back when I needed him most. Vernon Davis, my stepfather. He hadn't aged well. The photo I'd pulled from the nursing home's website showed a hollow-eyed man slumped in a wheelchair, grayer than I remembered but unmistakably him. The kind of man who used to stomp through our home like he was king, laughing too loud, drinking too much, and defending his son's evil like it was a badge of honor. Now he was a shadow, and I was coming to drag the truth out of that shadow. I checked into a small motel 2 blocks away from the nursing facility. The air was thick, southern and sticky, like it clung to every breath I took. That night I didn't sleep. I sat by the window with the curtains barely cracked, watching headlights pass and wondering if Marcus knew I was here. He'd always had a way of sensing things, of knowing. The next morning, I walked into the facility pretending to be a concerned relative. It wasn't hard. Old ladies with polite smiles could walk through most doors unnoticed. "I'm here to see Harold Dixon," I told the receptionist. She flipped through her records, nodded, and buzzed me in. "Room 212. He doesn't get many visitors. Might be nice for him to see someone." I walked down the hallway slowly, the click of my shoes echoing like a countdown. When I opened the door, the scent hit me first. Antiseptic and something sour. Vernon was sitting by the window, slumped in his chair, eyes closed. I closed the door behind me gently. "Vernon," I said. He didn't move. "Vernon Davis. You remember that name?" His eyes opened slowly. For a second, confusion danced in them. Then, recognition. "Elaine," he croaked. I walked over, heart pounding. "You've got a lot to answer for." He chuckled weakly. "Thought you'd be dead by now." I didn't flinch. "You first." He turned his head back to the window. "You came all this way to yell at an old man." "I came to find the truth," I said. "About Marcus. About my mother. About Sasha." At the sound of her name, something in his face twitched. "You know she's helping him," I pressed. "You know they're not done. And now I know you're still part of it." He took a long breath. "I'm old, Elaine. Too old to lie anymore. Then start talking." He closed his eyes again, as if bracing himself for a past he'd tried to bury. And then, slowly, he began to speak. Marcus wasn't just my son. He was my investment. After his mother died, I spoiled him. Covered for him. He was smart, but twisted. Got worse when he met Sasha. She fed his darkness. Called it ambition. Said he was destined for more. I felt bile rise in my throat. She blackmailed me, you know, he continued. When your mother started asking questions, Sasha said she had recordings of Marcus, of things he said, of things he did. She threatened to go public, unless I gave her money. So I did. I gave her everything I had. She kept Marcus out of jail. She protected him, covered up everything. She's been managing him ever since. My knees nearly gave out. All these years, I whispered. You let her keep me silent. I didn't let her, he said. I just didn't stop her. There's a difference. I stared at him. This man. This coward. This ghost who once stood over my mother's bruises and said, she probably fell. You don't deserve to rot in this chair, I said. You deserve prison. He gave a bitter smile. You're right. But you came too late. That's when the door opened. Turned. And there she was. Usha. Standing in the doorway like she owned the place. Dressed in a beige suit, a clipboard in hand. Her eyes locked onto mine. And she smiled like we were old friends. Well, well, she said. I thought you might come. I took a step back. You knew I was here. Of course I did, she said. You think Vernon didn't call me the second you walked in? He's still loyal, right, old man? Vernon didn't answer. He just looked away, ashamed. I should have finished this years ago, Sasha continued, closing the door behind her. But Marcus, he still thinks he can protect you. Sweet, broken Marcus. I clenched my fists. What do you want from me? You, she laughed. Nothing. You're just a liability now. A crack in the dam. Then she stepped closer. You testify, Elaine, and everything falls apart. The money. Power. The connections. We've built too much to lose it now. So I'm offering you a choice. What choice? She leaned down so close I could smell her perfume. Jasmine and rot. Disappear. Quietly. No more letters. No more courtrooms. No more digging. We'll even pay for a nice little place by the beach. You'll be comfortable until the end. And if I say no? Her smile dropped. We take everything. She turned and left the room like it was settled. But it wasn't. Because that night, as I sat in my motel, I realized something. If they were this scared of the truth, it meant I had all the power. So I made a decision. Called a journalist. A young woman named Bailey who had covered abuse cases in the past. I told her everything, on record. I handed over the letters, the photos, the threats. I gave her Sasha's name. Marcus's name. Vernon's confession. You publish this, I told her. Even if I'm not around to see it. She promised me she would. And then I boarded a bus back home. But when I got there, my house was gone. Burned to the ground. Ashes still smoldering. Yellow tape flapping in the breeze. A neighbor said the fire started the night before. Electrical, they claimed. But I knew better. They weren't just threatening me anymore. They were erasing me. If you believe no one should be erased for telling the truth, please like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter is coming, and what I do now will shock them all. I stood there in front of the charred skeleton of my house, arms wrapped around myself, the scent of smoke still thick in the air. Firefighters were long gone. Police too. All that remained was yellow tape, scorched earth, and the hollow ache of everything I'd ever owned turned to ash. My photos. My letters. My wedding ring. The home I shared with my mother in her final days. Gone. But I was not. And I would not disappear. 2 days later, I sat on a park bench, coat pulled tightly around me, waiting for the woman who could change everything. Her name was Bailey Lorne, young, sharp-eyed, with a notepad in one hand and a microphone in the other. She sat down beside me and handed me a coffee. I've read everything. Cross-referenced the court case, Pulled up Vernon's identity change, tracked Sasha's business records. Elaine. They messed with the wrong woman. A tear slid down my cheek. But it wasn't sadness. It was fury. They want to erase me, I said. But now I want the whole world to know what they did. Bailey nodded. We'll go public. But you need to understand this won't be clean. Once I publish, they'll come harder. Faster. I don't care, I whispered. Let them come. Just don't let me die unheard. Bailey got to work. She contacted survivors of Marcus's bullying from his teenage years. Former employees from Sasha's shops. Even an old secretary who once worked for Vernon's shipping business back in the 80s. And she had stories. Stories that made my skin crawl. Quiet payouts. Whispered rumors. Girls who vanished from the neighborhood. It was bigger than I thought. Marcus wasn't just a monster. He was a project. A protected beast. Caged only when convenient. Unshackled when useful. Bailey's article dropped on a Sunday morning under the headline. Elder abuse, family murder, and the power shield. How one woman refused to be silenced. My name was right there in bold. Elaine Porter, 84. And suddenly the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Survivors called. Women who said Marcus groped them at family events. Former friends of Sasha who claimed she bragged about having the police in her pocket. A nurse from Vernon's facility who said Sasha visited twice a week, always carrying envelopes. We had a case. And not just in criminal court anymore. We had one in the court of public opinion. The media picked it up. National coverage. Commentators debated whether Marcus should be rearrested. The DA's office called me in, this time with urgency, asking for the full set of letters. They didn't know I'd kept backups. Hidden in a safe deposit box miles away. Bailey arranged for me to do a live interview on national television. I wore my mother's old scarf and looked right into the camera when the anchor asked me the one question that burned. What would you say to your stepbrother right now if he were watching? I didn't blink. I'd say, you spent your life trying to destroy me. You failed. I'm still here. And now the world knows what you are. That night, someone slashed Bailey's tires. She wasn't hurt, but it was clear the game was turning ugly. Still, she didn't back down. Neither did I. But just when we thought we had all the cards, Marcus played one more. I received a letter. Not taped to my door this time. Not burned into wood or left in a shoebox. It was mailed. Properly stamped. No return address. Inside was a photo of my son. Bound. Eyes red from crying. The note attached simply said, "Next time we don't take pictures. We bury them." I screamed. Called Bailey. Called the police. Called every soul who would listen. And somehow, I found out the photo had been taken in an abandoned warehouse just 2 hours away. One of Bailey's sources tracked it down through the background. I didn't wait. Packed a bag. Took a kitchen knife. Flashlight. And the last ounce of courage I had. Bailey begged me not to go alone. But I couldn't risk her. Couldn't risk anyone else. This was my battle. The warehouse was crumbling. Rusted gates. Vines growing through cracks in the wall. Smelled like oil and fear. I stepped inside, flashlight trembling in my hand, heart hammering against my ribs. Called his name. My son's name. And I heard it. Faint muffled sob. I followed it like a string of hope pulling me forward. Then I saw him. Tied to a chair. Blood on his lip. Eyes wide with terror when he saw me. But before I could reach him, someone stepped out of the shadows. Marcus. His face was different now. Twisted with rage. Desperate. Wild. You ruined everything, he spat. Sasha's gone. Vernon's under investigation. My name's all over the damn news. You did that, I said quietly. I just stopped hiding it. He raised a crowbar. You could have been quiet. Could have had peace. Instead you chose this. I stepped between him and my son. Do it then, I said. Hit me. Like you always wanted to. He hesitated. And in that moment, I lunged. I stabbed the knife into his thigh. He screamed, dropped the crowbar, stumbled backward. I ran to my son, cut the ropes, pulled him to his feet. We bolted out the back just as police sirens wailed in the distance. Bailey had called them anyway, tracking my phone. They found Marcus crawling, bleeding, still screaming threats. This time they didn't let him walk. He was arrested on the spot. Assault, kidnapping, conspiracy, attempted murder. And Sasha. She vanished. But not for long. A week later, she was caught trying to cross the border with forged documents. Now they both face trial. And me. I'm living in a small apartment by the water. Quiet. Clean. My son visits every day. My grandson is healing. My story is out there. And for the first time in my life, I sleep without locking every door twice. But don't think this is the end. Because in the next chapter, I face them in court. And what I say will shatter everything. If you believe in justice rising from the ashes, please like, comment, and subscribe. Next chapter is coming, and it will be the final reckoning. The courtroom was ice cold. Not from the air conditioner, but from the weight of what hung in the air. Truth, decades overdue, pressing against every wall like a silent scream waiting to erupt. I sat at the front, wearing a dark blue dress my late husband had once complimented. Back when I still believed peace was something that could be earned. My hands were steady. My chin held high. The world had seen the ashes of my home, the scars on my son, the tapes, the letters. And now it was time for them to hear my voice. Marcus was brought in first. He limped. A crutch under one arm. A sour scowl painted across his face. Even now, after everything, he held on to his arrogance like armor. Sasha came in next. Cuff. Chin up. Is cold. She looked like a snake in silk. Dangerous even in shackles. The judge called the courtroom to order. Attorneys made their opening remarks. Then they called the first witness. Me. I stood slowly and walked to the stand. As I was sworn in, I looked at the jury. 12 strangers who held the power my mother never had. Who might believe the truth I had buried in silence for over 60 years. The DA asked the first question. Mrs. Porter, can you please tell the court why you've brought these charges against Marcus Davis and Sasha Barnes? Took a breath. And then I began. I was 11 when Marcus first hurt me. 14 when he broke something inside me I've never fully gotten back. My mother saw it, heard it, but fear swallowed her. My stepfather ignored it. And when I tried to live, to forget, to move on, they followed me. In silence, in shadows, until they came for my mother, and took her from me. I told them everything. The abuse, the manipulation, the violence, the threats, the burning of my house, the kidnapping of my son, the night in the warehouse, the letters my mother hid, the bribes Sasha paid, the web Vernon tried to pretend didn't exist. Every pause in my voice was met with complete silence. Even the court reporter seemed afraid to blink. When I finished, my throat ached. My chest felt hollow. But my soul was the strongest it had ever been. Marcus's lawyer stood to cross-examine. He tried to poke holes. Isn't it true you never filed a report until recently? Yes, I replied. Because when a man like Marcus breaks you at 16, you don't just call the police. You learn to breathe without making noise. He asked about my memory. About my age. You're 84, he said. How can we be sure your recollection is reliable? I leaned forward, looked him square in the eye. Because when someone takes your childhood and buries it in shame, you don't forget. You remember every sound, every smell, every look. Trauma doesn't fade. It waits. The courtroom was dead quiet. He sat down. And then the verdict phase began. But not before Sasha made one final move. I'd like to speak, she said, standing despite the judge's warning. The court hesitated, but they allowed her. She turned to me. You think you've won, she said. You think this ends with me in jail. Elaine, people like me don't stay buried. We rise. And when we do, you'll wish you had stayed in that little house and kept your mouth shut. The judge banged his gavel. Enough. But the damage was done. Or so she thought. What Sasha didn't know was that Bailey had uncovered even more dirt: tax fraud, witness tampering, and a history of threatening whistleblowers. And every word she just said had been caught on record. The jury returned after deliberating for just 6 hours. Guilty. On all counts. Marcus. Guilty of assault, attempted murder, kidnapping, and obstruction of justice. Sasha. Guilty of conspiracy, witness intimidation, and accessory to multiple crimes. Sentencing came the next week. Marcus, life in prison without parole. Sasha, 25 years, no early release. They screamed, cursed. Sasha spit at the floor. Marcus tried to lunge at me. But I didn't flinch. I watched them both be dragged away, their empire of silence crumbling behind them. Outside the courthouse, reporters flooded the steps. Bailey stood beside me, microphone in hand. "Elaine, do you have anything you want to say to the people watching?" He nodded. Then I looked into the camera and said, "To every woman who was ever told to hush. To every girl who cried behind a closed door. To every soul who thought surviving meant hiding, let me tell you something. You are not alone. You are not weak. And your voice can shake mountains." Tears ran freely. Reporters sniffled. Bailey smiled, eyes glassy. And somewhere in the distance, I imagined my mother's voice, soft and broken, whispering, "I'm sorry. Forgive her now. Forgive the silence. 'Cause I broke it. Today I run a foundation in her name. The Ruth Porter Shelter for Survivors. A safe house for women of all ages who need a place to be heard, believed, and protected. I don't have many years left. But the ones I do, they're mine. Fully mine. No more monsters in the dark. No more being owned. No more shame. And if you've heard this story and felt something stir inside you, maybe pain, maybe rage, maybe hope, then I leave you with this. Tell your story. Because silence never protected me. But the truth saved my life. If this story touched your soul, if you believe no one is too old to stand up and fight, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your voice matters. And it's never, ever too late to rise.